Liberty Works Radio Network. This is the Truth Attack Hour, and yes, that's right. We're back with the Truth Attack. Okay, so I got a few things I want to get into this evening, so let's just get right into it. We are the Liberty Works Radio Network, and we do need the support of the members of the listening audience to keep the broadcasts coming. So if you enjoy the shows, the topics, the lectures, the information, we sure would appreciate it if you could find your way over to the LibertyWorksRadioNetwork.com website and get signed up as a monthly subscribing member. Even if it's as little as $10, $20 a month, we need the support of the members to keep the network operating. And if you want to get fully informed on the maladministration of the federal income tax by the IRS, the DOJ, and the federal judges since the late 1950s, you need to find your way over to tax-freedom.com and start reading. And I've also opened up a new YouTube channel at Tax Freedom. I'm not sure it's in the channel listing over at YouTube yet. That takes a little while. There's a delay, but I've linked it up on the taxfreedom.com website. It's right up near the top in the main panel. You can click on it, go over and listen to some of the videos I produced. I just did one today. It exposes why the Form 1040 is not a form that is required by law, and that you can look up in the law to see that that is true. Or at least you used to be able to look it up until they removed it from the law to hide it from you. And of course, now there's nothing listed in the law as being required. So you can show historically it wasn't required. No tax law was changed. The government just hid the requirement. And now when you try and use the law to find out what is required, it shows you that nothing is required. And that's sufficient evidence in court in front of a jury to prove that you had no authority at law that was operating on your person to compel you to file a tax return. And of course, with April 15th coming up, everybody's going to have to think real hard about whether they'll give more money to this administration or ask for an extension and not provide the government with more money until the administration is about to be changed out. Because Joe Biden is gone. This man is absolutely gone. Okay, and in fact, that's the first story we've got on the board. I'm going to get to the Fani Willis story, of course, which is breaking all over the country, how that Georgia prosecution is just blowing up in her face. I told you right from the beginning. That was a fraudulent prosecution with made-up charges, and we're going to get into that. But first, I want to talk a little bit about Mr. Bobulinski's testimony before Capitol Hill, because, of course, Joe has been saying for years he had no business or connection or involvement with Hunter Biden's foreign businesses. And, of course, we know that's a lie. Joe can't open his mouth and talk without lying to you. Everything he says is a lie. I bet he doesn't even like vanilla. So, Joe is as dirty as it gets. Bobulinski has the records. He has the personal interaction. He was sitting there at the table with the Chinese businessman when Joe came over, gave a little presentation, and then left. And then the money started flowing. Same thing happened at the University of Pennsylvania when he went there. He had an $800,000 a year job at the university doing nothing. He interacted with thousands of students. Yeah, right. The same way he interacts with the American people from the stage while president, right? He never talks to anyone. He runs away from reporters. He runs away from questions. We have a coward for a president, a real coward. He's too afraid of the American people to speak. He's too afraid of the reporters to speak. He's too afraid of his own policies to tell us what they are. This man is destroying the country. He is the destroyer of prosperity, the destroyer of wealth, the destroyer of the quality of life, the destroyer of security. the destroyer of peace, the destroyer of good order. He is the destroyer of life. I get this creature from the pit out of the office as fast as we can. So Bobulinski is testifying to Capitol Hill that Biden is lying. He was involved with Hunter's business. He was the point of the business. Joe Biden was the business. Selling access to his office and his influence over policy was the business. And policy was purchased by Ukraine, China, Russia, all the places he got money. You don't think they were selling them, what, bumper stickers that said, "Help Joe"? What do you think they were selling? They were selling access and peddling influence. And I told you 4 years ago, this man was the most corrupt politician on Capitol Hill. And it's played out that way across all 4 years. And of course, it's now a story. I told you this a couple of years ago, too. Oh, now they're concerned about aliens being counted in the census. They've finally woken up to the fact that if you let the Democrats count aliens in the census, you're going to lose congressional representation and electoral vote counts, because the states that should be losing those seats and electoral votes, because they're all based on the census counts, and the populations of California and New York, Illinois, the far left, ultra radical, extreme, absolutely insane states, citizens have been leaving for 3.5 years. The costs are too high, the inflation's too high, the government's too invasive, the taxes are too high. Now that they can only deduct a maximum of $10,000 as the state and local tax, they can no longer deduct the whole $40,000 or $50,000 that they're paying in the state for the expensive properties in California, New York, Manhattan. Now that they can't deduct it, they bailed. Those states should be losing representation in Congress and in the Electoral College. But surprise! The Democrats, Joe Biden and his administration, have been using replacement theory, which is absolutely real. And I don't mean having it anything to do with race. Replacement theory is bringing in illegal aliens to register them in the Democratic states that are losing citizens and then counting them in the census, so that in the next census, when congressional seats are reapportioned under it and the electoral votes are accordingly reapportioned, the Democrats won't lose the seats in California, New York, and Illinois that they should be losing. And thus they will preserve and keep the Democratic majority that they are stealing from the American people with treason by giving representation to foreigners over citizens. And this now is extended to budget outlays, where the big Democrat cities, Chicago, New York, Washington, are laying out literally hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions, to give food, shelter, housing, clothing, phones, and jobs to illegal aliens instead of American citizens. And how do the illegal aliens feel about it? They're attacking our police officers and looting our elderly and assaulting them on the street with drive-bys from motor scooters. Wonderful job, Joe. You brought in a whole bunch of wonderful people who are now going to get counted in the census. The first thing Donald Trump needs to do when he gets elected is start publicizing this corruption and perversion of government representation being given by the Democrats in both congressional seats and the Electoral College, and the budget priorities being given by Democrats to the illegal aliens and foreigners ahead of the American people. That's what the Democrats think about you. They don't care. I've told you this for years. What they care about is building the new world order, taking down the constitutional republic and replacing it with a socialist form of government. But they know the American people will not tolerate or even contemplate a discussion about an alternative form of government until every single aspect of the existing form is failing. And that's what the Democrats are trying to do. Overwhelm the food system, overwhelm the shelter system, overwhelm the medical system, overwhelm the social support systems on every angle at every turn, overwhelm the budget, bankrupt it, overwhelm the cities with crime and drugs and fentanyl and homelessness and sewage and literally open cesspools in the business district where they're letting the homeless camp out in the doorways of the businesses to close the business and shut down the American people, to let the foreigners and the homeless and the crazies and the drug addicts take over the entire downtown district. And in New York, they're still voting for more of it. Good luck. Lopez's seat just had a special election, went to a Democrat. New York is still voting for more of it. How stupid and oblivious can these people be? Apparently pretty stupid and even more oblivious. Unbelievable. Give us more crime, give us more theft, give us more not in your budget priority. And that's exactly what the Democrats are going to do, because they just got rewarded in the election for screwing the American people. You really think that if you reward them for screwing the American people, they're going to stop? Yeah, well, you haven't thought that one through. Well, the first thing Trump needs to do when he gets in office, in addition to stopping the border and stopping the funding of all this nonsense that Biden is flushing the money down the toilet with, is go after this to change the census. If you count the illegal aliens, you exclude them from the part where we apportion according to the counts. You put them into a separate category so that they're counted, but they're not part of the apportionment numbers or the congressional seat numbers. You shouldn't be giving congressional representation to foreigners. It's perversion. Not just subversion, but perversion. Okay, now Biden's special counsel on the classified docs. Biden's on TV acting all indignant. How dare he ask me about his son? What a lying piece of crap this man is. Biden really is human garbage. It turns out Biden is the one that brought up his son's death. Robert Hur didn't ask him about it. Biden brought it up and then lied about it, and doesn't remember. Of course not. He doesn't remember anything. Doesn't remember anything. That's how he's able to stand there and deny he did any business with his son, or knew any of the partners, or met anyone, or took any money, or because he's oblivious. He's an idiot. Real human garbage. Okay, and it's like I told you, there's just too much money sitting on Wall Street. They got a jobs employment report that came in, and the inflation number went from 2.9 to 3.1. And just that small, tiny raise, when they were expecting 2.9, they got 3.1. Just that tiny bump in expectation caused the market to drop 750 points in the first 3 hours of trading, and all the money sitting on the sidelines decided that was a buying opportunity and bought in to raise the market back so that it only ended up losing a bit. And it's risen the last couple of days, so now it's at all-time highs. Okay, we're back, and let's just get right back into it. As I was saying, when the commercial break came up, there's just too much cash that they printed under COVID. I mentioned in last week's show that they bumped the end in one of my YouTube videos. If you want to go over to the Tax Freedom YouTube channel and watch some of them, I said that they bumped the M1 money supply, which is readily available cash assets in our society. They bumped it from about 4.5 trillion in 2020 to over $20 trillion, $16 trillion. And all of the money, of course, that they passed out to individuals got spent at the institution, has funneled its way into their hands, and now you've got about $5 trillion sitting on the sidelines in the stock market looking for buy-in opportunities on every drawback. And that's why it keeps running, despite the fact that the economic outlook doesn't really look that good, because all the employment that they say is too hot to bring interest rates down isn't really there. It isn't really there. For instance, in the month where they announced that they had 1.3 million new jobs, that's not what happened. They lost 1 million full-time jobs, had 900,000 part-time jobs, and 400,000 full-time jobs. So they actually lost 600,000 full-time jobs. But the gain in jobs is some 300, 400,000 because of all the part-time jobs of people not being able to get by on one salary. So they've taken a second job, entered the workforce after 3 years out of it after COVID, or as seniors have gone back to work because they can't make ends meet on their Social Security check in the high price environment Biden's inflation has caused. And the Fed misinterpreted the bad energy policy inflation that was caused by high fuel prices as monetary policy inflation because they printed all that money and the Fed knew it. And he raised interest rates so high that they inverted the yield curve. So now the short-term rate is higher than the long-term rate, and banks aren't lending because they borrow at the short-term rate to lend at the long-term rate. And they have to pay more to borrow than they earn lending. They just stop lending. Would you make a loan where you lost money on every single dollar that you loaned based on just the interest rate? This isn't even considering the risk involved in the loan. So the Fed drove interest rates up so fast, so quick. Banks stopped lending. Main Street doesn't have any money. Everybody is stressed on Main Street. COVID used up cash and savings. If you lived off COVID, that's all been spent. People are tapping their 401ks, their IRAs, and anything else they can tap to raise the capital to get by today. And they're spending on credit cards. They're surviving on credit card debt, which is maxed out and beginning to default and become delinquent and default. And the credit cards are cutting off credit extensions. And as we saw the other day, the most recent report, they were expecting a 2.9% inflation rate. They got 3.1. The market, realizing that meant the Fed wasn't going to lower interest rates, which is what they've all been betting on, though they'll lower interest rates in March. They'll start bringing it down in March. Well, that inflation report told the Fed, no, inflation isn't under control. They're not going to lower interest rates. Main Street is going to get killed. Going to get killed. The defaults are beginning to accumulate, and the bankruptcies are going to start getting filed. The jobs are being lost, and production is shutting down all over the planet. There is no soft recovery here. This is a crash landing on the runway, the same way the jet blew up at Edwards Air Force Base back in '84. This is going to be a catastrophe. The Fed still doesn't realize that it was energy policy, not monetary. And there's all this money sitting on Wall Street, and the stock market is just too high. And Jerome Powell thinks that if he lowers interest rate, the market will take off and run up another 10,000 points. And that'd be in outer space, setting up a huge collapse and a fall. And of course, he's right. But if you don't lower interest rates, you kill Main Street. So what are you going to do? Save Main Street or make the 10% in Wall Street even richer? Well, it's pretty clear what Powell is going to do. Main Street is going to die in the next 8 months if they don't lower interest rates and get the banks lending again. But they're not gonna. They're not gonna. So it doesn't look good. They're not going to cut the interest rates, and the American people are going to suffer because getting the banks to lend is going to get harder and harder and harder as less and less collateralization and surplus funds are available in Main Street to make the bank feel comfortable with lending. All of this, well, real estate values are collapsing and imploding in most places, and especially so in the office real estate market, where the buildings are still half empty from COVID and the refinancing coming due isn't going to get done. No one's going to refinance a building that was worth $800 million 5 years ago that's half empty now and is only worth $500 million. They're walking away from that loan and handing the bank a $300 million loss. The banks are already stressed out for maintaining the reserve capitalization requirements in cash because the depositors have been taking their money out, and holders of big cash have been cashing in the CDs, paying only 2% or so, to go get the 4.5% in the money market. But the Treasury is paying guaranteed, renewable every 6 months, where it's waiting for a buy-in opportunity on the stock market to get into the big tech and the AI stocks, which have just been running off the board. But it's all got to come back. It's all got to come back. It just isn't clear what shock, what catastrophe is going to trigger it. But inflation is also going to get worse because Biden isn't doing anything about the Houthis impeding the passage of cargo and oil through the Red Sea. That means everything's got to go around the tip of South Africa, which adds like 3 months to the trip and more than triples the cost. All of that cost has got to get passed through to the goods once they get to market. So it doesn't look good. Biden is a lump on a log. He's actively pursuing policy that intentionally destroys the quality of life in America so that they hope things get so bad that the American people actually begin to entertain discussions about a new form of government. And surprise, the government has one already all set up and planned for you. It's called socialism, where you won't have any rights, the government will have the power, and whenever they need property, they'll take it. And you won't be able to say a thing about it. And how lost is our president in all of this? Did you see him? Well, first of all, he had an opportunity to speak to what? 500 million people around the planet, 100 million United States citizens, maybe 200 million. Halftime at the Super Bowl. They don't ask you any questions. They do things like, again, ask you what's your favorite flavor of ice cream, or since we know what your favorite flavor of ice cream is, tell us what kind of pie you like to have it on. What are you watching for, the game or halftime, Joe? Oh my God. But Joe, he didn't go. And do you know why he didn't go? Because his own administration thinks he's just too slow. They didn't think he could handle it. They were pretty sure he'd screw it up, just like he screws everything else up. Like the conference the other day where he comes out and tells us that the Egyptian predator Sisi is actually the Mexican president. Oh my God. Oh my God. So his big complaint, he came out and told us in a short little, I don't know what, is shrinkflation. He's all upset because the product manufacturers, instead of raising the price, so that you could afford to continue buying their product, they make a smaller package or put a little bit less in the package. He doesn't understand that. He thinks they're being greedy. What an idiot! What would you rather? Have the price too high to be able to afford the product anymore? Or get just a little bit less in the package for the same price without it going up? I'll tell you what I want. I want the same price, and I'll take a little bit less product. So Joe complaining about the companies reacting, in my opinion, the proper way under the circumstances that Joe Biden caused intentionally without realizing he was doing it, because he intentionally altered the future of petroleum by shutting down the Keystone Pipeline. That jacked the price of gasoline through the roof and kept it running. That's when it started. It didn't start with Russia and Putin. It started when Biden intentionally stopped the Keystone Pipeline. That threw a damp blanket over a red-hot industry and changed the entire future outlook. And then he shut down the permits, he shut down the leasing. He hasn't renewed anything. Things that are permitted, they're sitting on, dragging it out, any final approvals or permit approvals. He shut down petroleum, drove the prices through the roof. The companies, what are they supposed to do? Just keep putting out a big box of whatever that people can no longer afford because it's $7 or $8 instead of the $3.50 it used to be? Of course they're going to give you a smaller option to not change the price so that you don't get pissed at them for raising the price and making it too expensive. But Joe, he has to blame someone. He blames Trump, he blames the oil companies, he blames the stores. Oh, everybody's profiteering. None of this is my fault. It's all the evil people who are experiencing the consequences of what's my fault. Shrinkflation. What a moron. Oh my God. Somebody help me. Somebody help me. This man is gone. Okay, let's get to the big stories, which is this Fani Willis case, the corrupt prosecution of Trump in Georgia for alleged election racketeering is blowing up in corrupt and crooked DA Fani Willis's face. The testimony is just at this point becoming sensationally sordid as to how corrupt these people are. She's on the stand today getting all upset, acting condescending, combative, gratuitous, angry, raising her voice to questions, lecturing the whole court and the opposing attorney on his questions. And as you remember, I told you this all started with 100% fake charges over a phone call that Donald Trump made. I mean, both parties, every election, congressional, Senate, governorship, presidential, both parties fight tooth and nail on the day of the election at the end to try and find the votes, to go out and see if there isn't some place where they've missed it, or votes haven't been turned in, or there's something verifiably wrong. Both parties do this in every election. Donald Trump did absolutely nothing illegal or unusual by speaking to folks in Georgia and asking them if they were sure they had the counts right and was it not possible to find 10,000 votes somewhere. I mean, this is just absolutely normal. It's not telling anyone to go make up 10,000 votes. It's not telling anyone to cheat. It's asking them to make sure the system is working as correctly as it can be verified. And as I say, both parties do this all the time in every election. Okay, this is Thomas Fried on the Liberty Works Radio Network. And I was just starting to get into these Trump in court civil cases. What do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cases in court. I don't know if I got enough time to get through them all, but let's go ahead and get back into the Fani Willis case. This was this is blowing up on your face. They had a hearing today. And Fani Willis is on the stand, just she's done, she's cooked. It was, which is a good thing. It's proper. This was a politically motivated prosecution right from the beginning. It's a phone call as the basis. Try and find the votes. 18 co-defendants, of course, using the same tactic. Charge as many people as you can. Let a few of them off with slap on the wrist in a plea that has them testifying for the state. So, same thing. You had 18 co-defendants. 4 of them have pled, at least, and maybe helping the government, but I'll bet they're pissed now because it's become clear this is a totally corrupt prosecution that is actually being directed by the White House and Joe Biden. This has been basically proved because DA Fani Willis hired her lover Nathan Wade. Now, they've lied and said that their affair didn't begin until after the trial had begun and she had hired him. There's now testimony from a former friend of Ms. Willis that no, that's not true. They've been having the affair since 2019. She hired her lover, paid him $650,000, 7 times more than the RICO qualified attorney, because her lover, Nathan Wade, wasn't qualified. Then they went on 7 vacations to a whole bunch of places, and she repaid him for her part with cash. No checks, always cash, always cash. No, I keep lots of cash in the house. Yeah. Right. No, the $650,000 she paid him was used to pay for the trips and drinks and vacations and parties and fancy resorts. It all amounts to kickbacks. It's a kickback. And how do we know the White House is running the whole thing? Because her lover, Nathan Wade, actually submitted a travel expense voucher for $2,000 to go to the White House in Washington, D.C., to talk to the general counsel and get instructions from Joe Biden, his counsel, and the administration on how to proceed in the prosecution, the political persecution posing as prosecution in the state of Georgia. Democrat DA with a Democrat grand jury in a Democrat city with what will be a Democrat hard blue jury. You could convict, as they say, a ham sandwich if the meat in it was red. Apparently, nobody told Nathan Wade not to submit travel vouchers for expenses to travel to the White House, but instead to go to Fani and get the cash. So, this is pretty much dead in the water. Fani and Nathan lied to the court in sworn testimony, saying the affair didn't begin until after trial, literally in 2023. There's now sworn testimony they were together in 2019. So that's it. She's off the trial. The trial is probably going to be pulled out of their office. And Fani Willis will be removed from the case and disgraced, but go on doing just fine in the world of Democrats who reward people that attack Donald Trump, no matter how criminal and corrupt and dirty and evil the actions they used to attack Trump were. Okay, so let's look at the next case. So again, we got 6 cases, all of them from Democrat grand juries run by government DAs. I mean, Democrat grand juries, Democrat DAs, and Democrat districts that will have a Democratic jury. All of these are political prosecutorial setups. It's just ridiculous. Where's the one I want to talk about next? Oh, okay, here, let's talk about Stormy Daniels' case. This one is Alvin Bragg, of course, who, this is the case where it's alleged Trump paid Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal hush money before the 2016 election and then falsified business records to cover it up. Now, this is all based on misdemeanors that are not a felony and for which the statute of limitations had expired. So the New York has a law that says if the misdemeanors were perpetrated to either hide or cover up or aid the perpetration of an additional crime, it makes it a felony. So Bragg secured this indictment on the allegation that these crimes for which the statute of limitations has expired were triggered to become felonies for which the statute of limitations had not expired based on a felonious violation of state and federal election laws. Now, there's a real problem with that. One, if it's a violation of state election law, well, then that's not applicable because we're talking about a federal election that was held. It was a presidential election. That's not a state election. Everything about a presidential election has to be tried in federal court. And that's the problem. If it involves violations of both state and federal, well, first of all, you should be required to disclose what the person is accused of as a crime. That triggers the felony out of the misdemeanor that couldn't be used because the statute of limitations expired, but for this unstated, unidentified, alleged felony based in election law that this court has no jurisdiction over if it's federal election law, and which court has no personal jurisdiction over Donald Trump if it's a state election law alleged violated because there was no state election for a state position. It was a federal election for president. And all proceedings have to be done in federal court, not state. So again, this is a political prosecution. It's made up, it's pure fiction. And to prosecute a man, to pay a woman to go away and be quiet? Are you kidding me? Right? Are you kidding me? Half the Democratic Party would be in prison. This is the weaponization of the system, lawfare, the particular prosecution of crimes only against certain persons, i.e. political enemies. This is Soviet Russia, Communist China, and Fidel Castro's Cuba. This is real insanity. If this were happening anywhere in the world, the government would be condemning it. And here they are setting the example for the world to follow. And Trump, of course, is absolutely right when he says New York is a rigged city. There's a huge prejudice against him there. And pressing all of these cases is nothing but attempt after attempt after attempt by the Democratic Party to interfere in the upcoming election because they know Joe Biden isn't capable of winning on anything. His appearance, his mental ability, his competence, his performance, the condition of America anywhere except on Wall Street, the price of food, the price of drink, the price of gasoline. This man can't win on anything. So they have to try and steal the election again. And they're gonna. These judges are going to hold off and issue judgment against Trump the week before the trial to make sure it interferes with the election. It's as crooked as it gets. Of course, any conviction that are coming out of these blue Democratic cities where the court doesn't actually have any jurisdiction will ultimately be overturned in the Supreme Court. So the White House is directing, Lori Kudlow says the White House is directing all of these cases, not just the one out of Georgia, all of these cases. And you've got Jack Smith in D.C. pressing another case for obstruction of justice with regards to January 6th's alleged insurrection as an attempt allegedly to overturn an election. Again, a political prosecution made without evidence or basis by a weaponized special counsel. Trump is video of him on the mall saying we want to march patriotically, peacefully and patriotically over to the Capitol to let our voices be heard. There's nothing violent. There's no urging of anything. It's just pure fiction. It's Trump derangement syndrome run amok, based on a novel use of an Enron accounting statute, by the weaponized special counsel, using the statute in a manner never before used in any court in any case. Whole new approach to using the statute. Election interference. It's all made up and it ignores the video evidence of Trump urging the crowd to make a peaceful and patriotic march to the Capitol to let your voices be heard, and never inciting any crime, violence, or entry into the Capitol. In fact, Trump sought deployment of the National Guard beforehand and was blocked by the Democrats. I've told you before, this was whole thing, January 6th, the whole thing was a Nancy Pelosi setup done through FBI entrapment on the mall with people like Ray Epps urging everyone to go into the Capitol, go into the Capitol. He got probation. The leader of the Proud Boys, who wasn't even there, got 20 years for organizing people to go to the mall. Talk about weaponized, talk about election interference, talk about repressing political opposition. And as I've said before, Jack Smith was unlawfully appointed as special counsel from within the DOJ. And the law controlling special counsel appointment says that the special accountant appointment must be independent and made from outside the existing Department of Justice attorney pool. His appointment as special counsel will be declared invalid and the case dismissed. In Florida, you got the classified documents case where Trump, as president, had the right to have some, turned back most of them, and the DOJ engineered a subpoena ordering that he turn over everything else that they kept, knowing that having turned over already what they thought they should, that they would refuse the subpoena. And then instead of going to a judge to get a civil order to comply with the subpoena, the DOJ, Merrick Garland, the political animal, not an attorney, weaponized the whole civil action by raiding Mar-a-Lago criminally, staging the document photos. When was the last time you heard of a civil litigant being allowed to criminally raid their civil opponent because they wouldn't cooperate with a subpoena that had not yet been put to a judge? You go to the judge for an order. You don't criminally raid your opponent. That's Nazi. Straight up Nazi. No crime, no report of any crime, no FBI investigation, just he refuses to give us everything. He had a right to keep records as the president. There's immunity, and the presidential records for the library are allowed to be taken. Obama took them, Clinton took them, Bush took them, Reagan took them. Oh, but not Donald Trump. When he takes them, it's a crime. And Letitia James in New York campaigned on going after Trump without a crime. Maybe I'll talk more about these cases next week. This is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Radio Network. Get on over to taxfreedom.com and check out my YouTube channel. And again, we need your help at the Liberty Works Radio Network. Sure thing. You too. Bye-bye.